Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 438, recorded live on Saturday, July 30th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have Antha from Utopia on Kyber.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Welcome back. We also have Asheras, also from Kyber.
Hey, how's it going?
And new to the show, we have Strimtom joining us.
Hey, what up, everybody?
Welcome. This week's screenshot. Celsius sees the blood moon in the new light in the 279th screenshot of the week. I think the name here is slightly amusing, given that there's fire involved. It looks like it's a nice little screenshot. I'm assuming that is the Draconic Incarnation Aura thing.
I think that's the Druid one.
Is it the Druid one?
Yeah. That's what it looks like to me.
One of the two.
That's what I was thinking too.
The Fire Elemental.
I haven't really actually looked at them. Well, it's not in Fire Elemental form either, though. So, but in any case, we like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by CyberEars, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend sometime, probably on Saturday. You can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or our website, DDOCast.com, where we have a calendar. Social media at DDOCast is the best one to follow me on by far. On the podcast this week, there's not really a lot of game news. We'll talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the community and some lightning posts to wrap up our discussion on spell selection. But what we're going to do this week is we're going to be looking at, and we kind of struggled to figure out a name for this episode. We're going to be looking at a lot of the stuff that's happening around the game. Not necessarily in the game, but around the game that's kind of affecting it in that sort of sense. So we went with the title of Metagaming Checks because we're looking at kind of the big picture of what's going on in DDO and kind of some of the stuff that's been in the news for the last couple months that we've talked about on the show, but we haven't really discussed it on the show. We've just kind of been hitting it in the news section. There's quite a bit of it, and we're going to start with the producer's letter. And I think we'll start just kind of in a general sense because of everything else going on. Did you find the producer's letter encouraging? Why not? What was encouraging? What wasn't encouraging? Go.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually really find it encouraging. I think the producer's letter is one of the things that they need to do, and they need to do consistently. When the first one came out at the beginning of the year, I was really excited because it's really cool to get to see just even insights into the development process and the struggles that they go through and things. It makes the company seem like they're human beings that really enjoy the game, and seeing the new stuff that they're excited about themselves. It's cool, even if they might say something and then we don't know when it will come out, or maybe something will get canceled. It just still gives you an idea of what's going on in their heads and that there's cool stuff to come. So overall, I just get excited whenever I see something like that.
I thought this producer's letter was better than the last one. The one we got back in March spent probably 2/3 of it doing a recap of what had happened before, talking more about U29 and some of those sorts of things. This one was a lot more forward thinking, which was nice to see. The Slaver series is coming, the Cannith Crafting is coming. Kind of laid out a little bit of a plan for the Favored Soul and the Monk coming next in terms of the class passes, which was nice, and then dropped some hints about some longer term stuff. Because I think the other thing that the March producer's letter didn't do well was it only gave us one update's worth of info. This one's talking about we want another enhancement tree like Harper at some point. We want to tackle the augment system at some point. And then talking about Tiefling and Azamar as well at some point as being some things that they were looking at long term. And I think a good mix of short-term and long-term goals in this is important because we want to know what's coming in the short term so we can get excited about it, but we also want to see that long-term piece so we can really feel like the game has some longevity to it and some viability to it. So I thought this one did a better job of that.
I agree with that.
As stated, it was a much better letter than the last one. It's nice to see them taking player feedback on the festivals and how they're going to continue to add on to the night revels and to maybe redo the loot or the randomness in the what was it, the mimic
The
hunt?
Mimic Hunt, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's nice to see that they're receiving our feedback. And it's, personally really excited to see the Slave Lords come out. Don't know much about it, but it should be fun.
Yeah, I don't actually know anything about it. It was never something that I played. When I was playing pen and paper, it was almost always, we'd make it up. It wasn't. We didn't tend to use modules or anything like that, for better or for worse. But yeah, I think they've done. I thought Haunted Halls was great. I thought Temple of Elemental Evil was an above average quest. I can't really speak to how well they adapted the modules because, again, I never played them, but I enjoyed the content.
I like that they're gonna, at least from my perception, is that we're gonna get 3 different quests. One for A1, A2, and A3. I don't know if they've actually said that, but I hope that's the case because one of my biggest issues with Temple of Elemental Evil, in particular, was that really should have been a series of quests versus one big, massive quest. I think they could have done a better job. I guess technically it's 2 quests, part 1 and part 2, but there was a lot more they could have done with that. And hopefully they're going to take more time and do this one. It seems like they're going to do this one in a little bit bigger scope. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I found that the Haunted Halls was kind of like a good balance, where it was like that fun adventure dungeon where it just felt like an adventure, and it was still definitely hard at times when you had it on Epic Elite. But Temple of Elemental Evil just can sometimes feel just especially more long, and it kind of needs to be broken up. And if you're not kind of like that person who's playing the game all the time, like kind of like the more power game focused person, you probably won't get anything out of Temple of Elemental Evil, not the loot or just the positive experience that a lot of other people did. So hopefully if they do break it up, that'd be ideal, because the modules is just such a cool idea.
Not to mention that, but it would be nice to be able to actually get groups for this stuff. I know it's hard to get people to actually devote, like 3 hours to run through Temple, especially if you don't know what you're doing.
I think part of the problem with Temple of Elemental Evil is, one, the loot was very grindy. The mechanics of it was exceptionally grindy. That and Thunderforge were like the peak of, here's some cool loot, go grind for it. Whereas the other problem with Temple of Elemental Evil in part 2, you're looking for these little tiny things you have to like search around for, which I think is probably not really a mechanic that people tend to enjoy. It's not a very enjoyable mechanic to go look for the little glowing dot on your screen, as opposed to kind of navigating through a map and solving puzzles and fighting monsters and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I think random elements like having a key or a gem you need to find somewhere are fine. But I agree with you in terms of how easy it is to overlook that thing. I mean, even just the key that's in Curse the Sky is annoying sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, give me a chest or something like that, and again, randomize it. That's fine, but I really don't want to have to really stare at the screen to try and find this thing. Or
my personal spot check should not impact my enjoyment of the game.
Yeah, every time you have to backtrack because you missed something because it wasn't obvious enough, you just
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
So, other than Slave Lords, was there anything that really stood out to you about the producer's letter that you're really excited about? Maybe something if there's anything that you're kind of wary of?
In the short-term stuff, the Cannith Crafting is the biggest one for me. I look at that and I say, this is something that could be very interesting for a number of different reasons, but mostly because I feel like, take Legendary Greensteel, for example. I'm not a fan of it. I feel like, A, it's grindy, and B, there's not a lot of good value for a lot of builds, and there's these set bonuses that require you to devote so many loot slots to it for gear that's not very good. But then I look at something like a Cannith Crafting coming, 6 months or so later, and I'd say, that's something that, because of your ability then to put three effects on a single item, you could theoretically get the density on your other 6 or 7 slots to be able to do a 4 or 5 piece LGS set. So I could see Cannith Crafting really not just being great in and of itself, but it also being advantageous for the set bonuses that came out of Devil's Gambit, the LGS set bonuses, and the Slaver series has some set bonuses. And just being the loot balance and the ability to really get your loot set, I think that could be really key to creating some really unique combinations and having fun.
Yeah, I 10 times agree with that one. When there was discussion originally of when usually the first post is out and they're talking about the loot, a lot of people are like, but it's not going to be as powerful as raid gear, so why would you use it? But the fact that there's so many, all the new items seem to be so specialized from all the different raids. It's got the quality bonuses now, and everything is so geared towards one area. It's hard to find an item that just has, 15 constitution or something on it that you actually want. And being able to kind of stack specific slots to fit the rest of your build, I think, is something that a lot of people might either have overlooked or just not thought about how incredibly powerful that is, considering, you can actually, you'll be able to really customize your character instead of having to just start sacrificing a bunch of stats because you want one stat.
Well, yeah. Well, take stats, for example. Currently in game, there is not a named item that has a stat bonus over +12, and that was from Doge. Since the Father, there's been nothing. It's been all insightfuls and qualities. So the only way to get a +15 or a +14 or a +16 or anything like that is with random loot, or soon to be Cannith Crafting as well. Named loot just really
should
isn't
correct
getting
one
it.
thing. There is the legendary green steel weapons you could get higher stats on.
That's true. Yes, the green steel weapons, which
is not exactly
for a melee.
It's not exactly the best spot for a stat.
No.
In a lot of
Well, for a
builds,
caster, it's fine.
caster,
but-
sure.
Yeah, sure.
But it's something to keep in mind. Is something that's there.
Yeah, it is on LGS. I overlook it because I don't like stats on weapons except for casters.
Yeah.
Well, since we're kind of already talking about Cannith Crafting, what do we really think about Cannith Crafting, and how does it mesh with how the current state of loot is in the game?
So the current state of loot, as you see it, you find a bunch of items that have spell power that you generally don't want, and then you also find sometimes those super cool rare items. And when the new loot first dropped, I thought it was amazing that you kind of have to scan through loot every single time. Every single item you pick up, all of a sudden you can't just breeze through it, especially when you're leveling up or once you're at level 30, because sometimes you'll just find that one item that just happens to have the insightful stat that you wanted or something, or it has, the strength con, insightful con, and you lose your mind. And the fact that if you want, instead of grinding out for 1 billion hours, that you'll have a system that kind of works in tandem, the Cannith Crafting, where you can still grind for 1 million hours, but instead of hoping to get that lucky drop, it can be a lot more consistent, and not just for you, having a way to kind of bring that also potentially to your friends or your alts or things like that because you already built up the system. I think it's great with the random loot system because, don't get me wrong, I think the random loot is great, and the fact that really strong items still drop from random loot that are competitive with some of the slots you might use on your other characters. There's something to be said about consistency, and I'm really glad that it's being brought into the game.
Antha or Asheras?
I'm very excited to see it coming. It definitely needed an update since the random loot came out. I like that we're going to have a little more control over our loot with the 3 slots, because the random loot was just a little bit too random for some items, especially for caster items. I'd find stuff that's I don't want a melee ability on my caster item, So I'm looking forward to that. The only thing I dislike about it is the fact that they went away with the complexity of it, but at the same time I do like that. It was cool having all 3 schools and having all the collectibles that you would have to collect for crafting.
What do you mean by you say that they went away with the complexity of it? Because it still seems like it's pretty complex. As far as I can tell, they kind of cleaned it up. So instead of having a shard for each different stat of each different level, you just have a shard of a stat and then a shard of a level, and that will give you the item. So it cuts down on the clutter. But other than that, I mean, it still seems like it's kind of the same amount of complexity.
I meant more about the ingredients. It's now 1 ingredient.
Yeah.
That was kind of a bummer, and taking it down to one school, but hey, you know what? If it's going to make the game perform better, I'm all for that.
You also have to wonder if what kind of collectible loophole or hoops we're going to have to jump through if they actually want to make it hard, right? Because they did say that there's still going to be collectibles involved. So if it's like, oh yeah, it's one item, guys. You just need one material. By the way, you need to get 7 different types of collectibles for a strength item. It's like, oh okay.
I have a feeling it's going to be more like they're going to more fully utilize collectibles and try to give collectibles more of a meaning. Not that you're going to need a ton of them for one specific item, but that you're going to be utilizing them a lot more in your crafting. Not, by the way, we haven't like seen any of the like anything more than that's been on the forums. We're not talking about like
I think I'm glad they're bringing collectibles to Forgotten Realms. It annoys me when systems get started and then seem to get dropped for whatever reason. I like it when there's consistency there. I think the Cannith Crafting system's huge, though, because one of the things that happened with random loot is they added in all these insightful stats or insightful effects for almost everything. So the number of effects you're looking for most builds, in a lot of cases, doubled. You don't just need a stat item now. Now you need a stat item, an insightful stat, and a quality stat, and maybe an exceptional stat too, depending on the build. So, and the same is true of a lot of things. You're looking for not just double strike, but insightful double strike, and maybe even quality double strike. And that sort of thing, really requires you to get density on your items. You can't have a piece of gear you're wearing just for one effect anymore. Not like you could for years. So I think Cannith Crafting becomes almost mandatory if you really want to metagame heavily.
Mm-hmm. I think it will be.
The things that I like about where with Cannith Crafting is coming out and kind of the general state of loot today, I think the mechanics that they're implementing where it's scaling based off the minimum level of the item, how they're kind of changing Cannith Crafting to utilize. I agree with Antha. I think it's going to be less complex utilizing the collectibles system a little bit more. I think those are all things that I really like. I kind of feel like that's where we should have been in the first place. I think we would have just been a lot better off if that's where the initial implementation would have been. Where it kind of bogs down for me is the different kind of things that you can get, like the actual attributes of weapons. I like that when you're talking about Asheras about the insightful and quality bonuses of different stats. I like the way that all that's kind of working is it's making you have to make more choices about your loot, as opposed to, oh, well, here's the best cloak, and here's the best helm, and here's the best boots, and everyone's wearing those items, right? Like, there's a lot more of I think there's more choices to be made about your loot, which I think is better for the game. It also means that, someone who is newer to the game and hasn't had time to grind out the past 4 raids is not going to be as far behind in terms of loot necessarily, right? Certainly that there are named items and raid items are better than your typical random loot item, but there are a select few random loot items that are better than anything you're going to find on a named. You'll be able to the ability to make things that essentially make random loot from crafting, I think is what those systems all needed to be when they came out in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Although I do think that that right now with the changes, they might have gone a little bit too far in the direction of like too many stats. Because yes, random loot is absolutely just better than it used to be. So if a first lifer is better off, there's now more stats that didn't appear on random loot, and especially for like a new player. They might see items like stunning or all the assassinate items that just seem to be spawning on every single loot drop you get. It just gives you assassinate and not realize exactly where these abilities come from or what they do, or how do you balance like what's better, double strike or speed or deadly, like which one of these?
And I think the game is always better off when you have choices like that to be making. Because one of the biggest strengths about DDO is the choices that you get to make in character creation, and part of that by extension is loot. So I think having a lot of different choices that you can make really amplifies that. Although we do have to still break them. I mean, a lot of people still have the idea on the mold that these are the best items I need to go and get. So it can challenge that kind of a mindset a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I will say in terms of what you could find on items was probably at its best right after Menace of the Underdark. Other than the fact that I like how things scale now better, but the actual type of effects you could get, I think, was better at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
About the effects like the rebel effects and the lacerating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
I would love to see those come back in some sort of scaling fashion or whatever. And I don't think it would be too hard, but I think that point in time was the best place we ever were in terms of what you could find. Now it's better in the mechanics behind the scenes and the choices that it forces you to make.
Definitely agree. Whatever happened to all that stuff? I mean, that was here like 1 second, it was gone the next.
There was a loot change, and some things went away. I don't think they really ever officially said why some of that stuff went away. Other than, I think I remember seeing something that said that they would have to essentially recreate that stuff under the new system. Which, I mean, sure. But what I'm hoping for is once they get Cannith Crafting out, my kind of hope to see is to say, okay, we've got random loot and Cannith Crafting mechanically functioning the way that we want them to, which again I think is a good place to start. And then they can go back and add in more of those abilities and effects to one system or the other, or both systems, depending on what the effects are. Which is what I would hope to see.
Even if it's like a little bit underwhelming at first, like, oh, the effects just aren't as good as you want it to be, they did all the systems work, so that way they can then add cool effects after.
And I think the systems work they have done is great system work and is where we want to be. And to be honest, as far as Cannith Crafting goes, I've never really done a lot of crafting. I tried it for a little while. I found that it was slow, grindy, and like there wasn't anything that I was looking to craft. I think now that I can actually, I look at random loot and say, ooh, it would be awesome if I found this random loot that was ... And being able to craft that is something we haven't really ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
To a small extent, the original Cannith Crafting had that. But at least in my experience, it wasn't really... You couldn't really just go and make random loot. It was there were two different systems, and there was some overlap.
Well, okay, you sort of could. So I still use a little bit of the Cannith Crafting, especially when I'm twinking out characters for low-level stuff, or if I just want to build a character to help out a friend. And you definitely can create some very strong low-level items.
Low-level?
Low-level items. Not endgame items, but low-level items that still reproduce. Like getting +6 stat items for level 9, or getting effects that you normally can't get, like melee and ranged alacrity, so 10% attack speed starting from level 1. So that there are some effects that, I mean, you probably can get better than 10% attack speed at max level. I'm not saying it goes all the way, but I don't think that there's no use to Cannith Crafting right now. But I do think that for a fair deal, it could still, some of it even be competitive with like the old randomly generated loot, because the old randomly generated loot just wasn't that good overall.
What we have now, I still use it. It fills holes for when you're TRing and you need something to break DR, or just an item for a character that you don't really play.
Yeah, DR breakers is a huge one.
Yep.
Well, and I think that has more to do with the fact that the DR, the alignment-based effects and weapons is not functioning like it should be.
Yeah, I know that is a bug. It's going to get fixed at some point.
Yeah, they mentioned that in the update on Cannith Crafting. I think for me, what it comes down to is, okay, there are some things that you can make that were viable with Cannith Crafting, but for me, it mostly came down to what I see most people using Cannith Crafting is the heavy TR train, which I was never on. So, and my kind of personal stance was anyways, well, okay, Cannith Crafting stops being really viable and useful at, let's just, for sake of argument, say level 12.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's a generous but fair just kind of benchmark. And level 12 is like less than half the XP you need to get to level 20. Anyways, so
It's maybe a quarter.
yeah, they didn't seem to hold enough value, long enough value. In fairness, this is also coming from a player that still had some low level items that I'd kept for one reason or another throughout the year. So I had a few things that I could throw in there that were decent enough to get me through those levels anyways. But
Well, it's kind of funny that you don't like it though, because having 14 characters, I think. It should have been a system that appealed to you because you can gear out your characters in advance very easily.
well, yeah, but up to level 12. But how
but-
much TRing have you seen me do though? That's the thing.
Oh, I agree. And the problem is that you're right. It had very limited range of value for gear. I never made any gear with it. I always made weapons, because there was that first time when it first came out when making specific DR breakers, or specific weapons for specific monster types was actually useful. And so I made the anarchic burst of greater whatever bane. I can't remember what now, but I had my lob beaters and your devil beaters and that sort of thing, and it was useful for that. But that was the only thing I really ever used it for.
And I had Shroud Mineral 2s on most of my characters, or
Yeah,
I
I
had
did
a huge stash of Metalina Pure Good weapons, and it was just one of those things that I could invest. The one thing that I made that I really actually went out of my way to craft, other than just kind of tinkering out the system, was electric absorption trinkets when Fall of Truth came out. And that was really the only thing I ever got into crafting to do.
Well, the problem is, it's just, it never was designed to go above level 20 anyways, because that's where the cap was when it came out.
Half the problem, for sure.
Yeah, and just the way the system worked, it just wasn't useful for most people. I don't know that anyone's really gotten into it if they weren't using it at the beginning.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, we talk about using it for DR breakers, things like that, but that's we already have the DR breakers because we've been playing for a million years and we have all the items. But then if you're a new player and you try to get into it, making a DR breaker, you have to get your crafting skill to 40 or 50. That's going to take you years to do because you don't know where to get the items or
how to
level up quickly.
Some of the best stuff that you want to get is there are collectibles in there that are hard to find. There's some rare collectibles that are in that system. Particularly some of the better stuff. I want to mention Helena in the chat is saying something that we've kind of said, but I want to mention it for someone that's listening. I've collected so much over the past years, I don't need to craft because I generally have what I need already, which I think is a very succinct way of saying where I was at as well. I want to move on from loot. Do you guys have anything else you want to say on where we are with loot and Cannith Crafting?
With Cannith Crafting, if you're not crunching, start crunching right now before the update comes out.
Oh yeah.
What is it? Max level kicks you at almost a little over halfway through the 400.
Yep. So if you haven't started Cannith Crafting and you think you might be excited about it, do it now. I don't know if it's going to be easier or harder, but just get started on it now while you can.
The thing to remember is, and why that's really good advice, is the recipes we have now are going to disappear. If you assume that most of the functionality of how the XP system works is going to translate, the way it works now is the more often you craft something, the less XP you get from crafting that thing.
Yep.
So, you're looking at having to grind some stuff later. You can craft a bunch of stuff now that you're never going to be able to craft again, so you won't get a quote repetition penalty.
And the last thing I'll add is if don't throw out your ingredients, because the larges are going to turn into a 1-to-1, and I think they have yet to come out and say what the lessers are going to turn into, but they're going to be tradable.
Yeah.
You convert them. My last comment on this one is that I kind of think of it like the enhancement system rework, where they went from the awful laggy box to now all the different trees. Even if there are some mad dumpster tier trees out there like Henshin Mystic and Eldritch Knight, it doesn't matter because overall the system's good and it gives you the option for possibilities. I think that even if Cannith Crafting comes out and it's super underwhelming, they can fix that because they did the background work. So I'm excited for it either way.
At the very least, the systems work they did on random loot and by extension Cannith Crafting of making items, making the attributes of different items scale based on your the minimum level of the item means that you don't need to do as much work to add recipes. Like, because the way that it is now, Cannith Crafting is now, they would have had to add a new recipe in for strength plus, what's the highest, I don't know what the highest you can make in Cannith, just say plus 9. Like, they would have had to add a specific recipe in for plus 9, plus 10, plus 11. Those all would have been separate recipes, whereas now, like you say, Shard of Strength.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it has, like I said, the system work is great. It's going to allow for more flexibility and longevity over time, and hopefully they'll keep working on it bits and pieces here and there. So, with that, we're going to transition into this game from the forums. It's kind of been going. This is a conversation that's gone on, off and on and off and on. There's a current thread that I thought was going pretty good, and it's a tension between endgame difficulty. And I'm going to read 3 different people who posted, because I think, not just because we or me agree with one or the other, but I think this gives a fairly good cross-section of the discussion that was going on. So the first one came from Permaband. He said, the highest difficulty setting to become, the quote, highest difficulty setting to become the quote, standard difficulty setting, there is no progression from normal to hard to elite. Instead, there's elite, and you go down to hard or normal for some extra fast XP after the elite XP is used up. If you want to return some challenge and difficulty to the game, want players to have something to aspire towards, start kicking their asses again. Make us swap down to normal for the easy wins, let hard be an actual description instead of merely a title, and make elite genuinely harder than hard. Then he quoted Sev from a while back. He said, players are used to leading their way through the game, and DDO decision makers don't want that to change. On the flip side, this one came from Fran Olmsford. Said, if you do that, what Permaban was talking about, you would need to change favor to give maximum at normal difficulty to lose a lot of players. You also need to change the renown rewards to be much closer to normal to elite than when over-leveling quests, because otherwise only the Ubers will be able to level their guilds. He also says if they want an extreme difficulty setting, then you can give that without hurting the rest of us. Make it hard enough that even triple completionists require a group to actually complete it, but don't give extra XP and loot and favor or renown above what you get for elite. Okay, maybe add some rewards in. He said specifically that would only be used in that difficulty, but kind of the general idea. Tell them that difficulty is there for the challenge they want, and that's it. The last one, and this actually came from a content designer, Linabelle, who is fairly new to posting on the forums, and what they said was, what is endgame if not challenging material in which to advance? I vastly prefer the current system where the game starts you at absolute rock bottom with nothing and points you towards the highest of the high with an assurance that if you work hard, you can actually make it to the top. I personally think that if there are always something to improve on, it would feel like the game was just taunting you. Shouldn't there be an end to the game, a tangible level where you can actually do it all? If you can't ever reach the end, why continue playing the game? Personally, I happen to think that DDO is a lot of fun, which is a lot of why I play. Some of why I play, though, is because I know that my efforts will eventually get me to the end, and then I can look back and say that I actually won an online game. My answer to what's the point post will always be because it's fun. So there you go. So there's kind of 3 shots. One from the camp of, this game's too easy, make things harder, kick my butt. One from the kind of the other end of the spectrum of, if you do that, then people aren't going to be interested in playing as much, because if you're going to have rewards, the average player is going to want to achieve those rewards, particularly when you're talking about favor, as an example that you have to run those harder difficulties to do. So they're coming from the standpoint that the game is set it up that to encourage you to achieve certain benchmarks, so you should be able to achieve those benchmarks, and one that kind of splits the middle of it should start harder, and you should be able to get to the point where you can do the hard stuff. What do you guys think about this? Where do you think endgame is? Should it be somewhere else? Good luck.
I think when it comes to difficulty, you have this like impossible question of okay, so first, okay, how do we make the game harder? So somebody has to answer that question, right? So, like, because they tried to make the game harder with billions of damage on health on monsters and damage on monsters, and apparently that didn't make the game harder. So it's really difficult to answer that question in general. And then even still, then also, what do you reward for that? Like, imagine they added some fictional, insane, ridiculous, super difficulty throughout the game, and every quest had one. How do you reward somebody for that? Do you just give them more XP? Because then
Should
people
you reward
figure,
someone for that?
right? Like, or yeah, or should you get a reward? Like that, and that's the real question. Because if there's no reward, then how many people would do that instead of elite? Especially if you're on like the TR train, that kind of stuff, right? So, and I think those questions, it's just the first thing that pops out to me. It's a kind of like, yeah, they're great ideas, but then how do we implement these ideas?
First thing I would say is I categorically disagree that normal and hard don't exist. They don't exist for me, but they do exist for a lot of other players, especially newer players. So, a lot of people who bring this argument up are endgame players or metagame players for whom elite is the only difficulty and bravery streaks are the norm. And I understand that, but they have to understand that they are a very small segment of the game, and probably less than 10% of the overall game population. And they're the only ones who don't find difficulty in other segment in hard and normal. So I don't necessarily know that Turbine needs to focus 100% of their attention on that. The other thing is that these players generally, that 10% group, are looking to get through those levels, heroic levels and early epic levels, to get a past life or something like that. And when you talk about endgame, to me, endgame is 28 to 30 and legendary content. And that's where I want to see challenge. I don't necessarily want to see challenge at level 4 or 5 on a TR. It might be interesting, but I can live without it because I'm really going through those levels as a path to a goal. And the goal isn't to be challenged at every step along the way to that degree. I want to kind of get through it quickly. I would rather see them focus, rather than trying to rebalance every level from 1 to 30, focus on creating really hard content from 28 to 30 and in legendary. And give me a reason to need a triple completionist, because right now I don't have a triple completionist and I can run just about any content on any difficulty I want. So to some degree it feels like you're improving a character just to improve it, not because you actually need it. And I would like to actually need it at level 30 when I get there.
Yeah, I play this game probably good 30 to 40 hours every week at least, and I don't do Epic Elite because Epic Elite and Legendary Elite is just too hard. And maybe that makes me like an awful player. I don't think of myself as an awful player, but I generally just don't play the super strong builds. I don't play the 20 Barbarian or 20 Ranger, or the Shirati build or anything like that. I want to play a Sorcerer, and Sorcerer is not amazing at doing Epic Elite and Legendary Elite, stuff like that. Or I want to play some odd build that just can't do it. And I'm okay with not being able to do that. But for the majority of players, I honestly don't believe a lot of players do things like Epic Elite. Elite, yes, but I think a lot of people don't do Epic Elite. There's just probably don't. And the reason I say that is because, as it turns out, there's actually a large group of people that do normal and hard. They're called First Lifers. That aren't VIPs. They all do normal, actually, and hard. And I would be willing to believe that the majority of players probably don't do Elite that often, because that would involve repeating quests a bunch of times, right? And so when they see the group pop up and they go, oh, cool, quest on Elite, and they get the full group. But I'd be if I don't have any statistics on it, but I'd be very willing to believe that normal and hard are the most common difficulties, and Elite is not, even with the TR trains.
I think definitely when you start getting epic levels, people are going to run Elite less often. And I think that, so I was trying to take a couple notes so I don't forget some stuff while you guys are talking. I think when we're talking about discussion, there's a couple things that fall by the wayside. One is groups versus soloing. There's plenty of content. I think Ash already logged. But the other night, some people in my guild, and we grabbed a couple other people from some friends, some channels, stuff like that. We ran through Search and Rescue on Legendary Elite, and we cruised, and it was awesome, and it felt great. But you look at that group, too, and one, it was a group, right? Like, this was not us, like one person going through this quest and just totally mopping the floor with the quest. The other thing is, you look at that run was, we were a very balanced party. You know, I was on a barbarian. We had a really great healer, a couple warlocks. I think we had a ranged rogue or something like that. But you look at the group, and why did we cruise through that? One was, it was a group effort, right? Like, everyone was pulling the weight. Now, granted, one of the warlocks had like 100 kills, and was totally cream in the crop in the kills. But he wasn't doing it alone either, right? Like, we were all in there doing a group effort, and that's why, I think more than anything else, why we succeeded. Because everyone was there as a group with good characters and stuff like that. The other thing I think you lose in these conversations is the time investment, right? Like, I don't want to like say this in a negative term, but you know, the power gaming crowd, which I think it's fair to say that I am one of. You know, at this point, a lot of these players have invested 5 to 10 years of building up their characters and gearing out their characters and stuff like that. So when you go and do these harder runs, you're really cashing in on that investment, right? Like, and that's not going to be the same as someone who's had less time to build up their characters and stuff like that. The tricky thing with difficulty is Turbine has to kind of meet both sides where they're at, because the people that want to be challenged need the difficulty to be challenged, or they're going to leave. I know people who have done that. At the same time, if you want players to keep playing and new players to come in, you need to let them feel like they can actually achieve things. I think at the end of the day, for all the right reasons, Turbine has created a problem for itself. You look at the reincarnation feature, which was a great thing to add to the game. It's very popular. It's still very popular. But it also kind of encourages you to have fewer characters. So I think over the years, there's been a lot of choices that Turbine has made that have been, like I said, I think at the time they're good choices. Now you kind of start to look back and see the fallout of some of this stuff, where most players are, I think it's fair to say, they're playing maybe 4 characters. And there's plenty of people, particularly when we start getting in the power gaming crowd, the number of characters that are going to start playing is going to be much, much smaller compared to the casual people. I'm the exception to the norm in that I've got a lot of characters. And I think Ash will fairly say, and back me up on this, that all of my characters are not created equal. There are some characters that are better to bring to Legendary Elite than others.
When you got 14 characters, that's how it is.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. The TR process has definitely shrank the.
It's not just the TR process either, right?
No, it isn't. But it's been an ongoing thing that as the game has gotten bigger, basically, playing fewer characters has made more sense if you want to try and reach this nebulous concept of end game. Because you can't. I mean, back when the cap was 16. I think I had probably as many characters as you did, because you'd run the cap, and then they'd sit there, and every 3 days they'd run Shroud and VOD and Hound, and then you'd go work on a leveling project when raiding was done. And over time, you just build up a stable. But
those were also days where we didn't have raid bypass timers, though.
Yeah,
no, that's true too. That's another one that has greatly limited. The raid bypass timer is greatly limited and disincentivized running multiple characters. That's why I like raid runes and that sort of thing, because I think that it has allowed you to get back to having a stable more so than running the same character ad nauseum.
Oh yeah, I think I highly agree with the raid runes thing. Like it's so good, because that's why I only had one character, and then when Legendary Elite came out, I was like, oh cool. So I just leveled up 2 characters to 30 and then got them pimped out, so that way it feels good to just go run a bunch of raids.
Yeah, the pendulum is definitely swinging back towards there being a reason for you to have more than one character at this end game power, like the end game kind of concept that we have in the past, which is encouraging.
The thing is, I can't harp on the reincarnation system for this, because I honestly don't think that's the problem. The reincarnation system has done infinitely more as like a longevity
sure,
thing for the
absolutely.
game. And because I don't know about you guys, but I've played like other games. Like there's this video game called World of Warcraft where made by this awful company Blizzard, where they go, "Hey guys, I know you love this character class, and you have this cool iconic ability, but there's a new expansion coming out, so we're gonna nerf your character class into the ground. Oh, have you been playing since like the game opened, and you love your character class, and you were there when AQ opened, and you have the special mount and stuff, and all the cool cosmetic items that are bound to your character in your inventory. Sorry, you can't play your character ever again because we're gonna nerf your favorite spec into unplayability, and now all your items are stuck on that one character, and you can't raid with your guild anymore.
Yeah,
Whereas in DDO, it's like, oh. They nerfed my favorite class. Reincarnate, get to keep my character. Cool.
and I think that's why I started by saying, for all the right reasons,
Yeah.
right? Like, reincarnation is great, has been great for the game. It's still great for the game. It's not for everyone. I don't enjoy it as much as most people do, I think, but it's still been fantastic. And that system has, especially when we're talking about a game that has so many build options, and you get those flavor of the month builds that are powerful. It's been great, absolutely.
It's just created the challenge gap. That's all between the brand new player or the brand new character and the longtime vet with the character that's been being played for 10 years. That gap is bigger because of the TR process, and that creates a challenge issue that needs to be solved. And that wouldn't exist otherwise. But I still think TR is a great thing. I agree with that. I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And I think you look at the changes to raid runes and some of the stuff that they made. That's probably the first step in a long time that Turbine has made that has created incentive for you to have more characters than fewer characters.
Yep.
So,
I will say though, I think they need to balance the difficulties a little bit better.
Sure.
And maybe balance the hit points and how hard they hit, because I mean, more hit points isn't harder. It's just longer.
True.
Well, actually, that's a question I wanted to ask you guys, because a lot of people will say that Legendary Elite is like not harder. How do you make the game harder? Like, because I'm trying to figure this out.
Honestly, I get my character a little bit.
Well,
I think the biggest
That's
thing
something
for
a lot of
me-
people do.
The biggest thing for me and what I would like to see in terms of game difficulty, the thing that I think is harder in DDO has more to do with execution and part. So you look at raids, which I think are generally going to be considered like raids are where the hardest difficulty should be, quote unquote. And I think raids where you have to execute a lot of teamwork are going to be more challenging. And I think that's where there's opportunities to make more challenging content, is to have mechanics that encourage that you need to actually learn, as opposed to, oh, there's a mechanic here. I don't know what it is because I don't need to worry about it because I just muscle through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you look at Deathworm is a really great example of there's a mechanic there that you have to execute to do the raid.
Red light, green light.
Well, I like, yeah. Well, yeah,
Red light,
Deathworm's
green light.
interesting with the end fight. Going back to a classic quest that I liked a lot that used to be really tough, Enter the Kobold. Back in the day when if you ran ETK on Elite, especially on a non-evasion tune, it was a nightmare. And that end fight,
Dude, that quest is still hard.
yeah, it is. Well, and it's unique. The end fight is unique. They have a unique puzzle too, which I like. But but if you look at how they did that, they didn't do that by those mobs shelling out way more damage or having way more HP. They did it with some unique mechanics and some unique requirements that. And if they can do that sort of thing, then I think that's Monastery of the Scorpion, same way. That's exciting.
Well, I wouldn't say that they didn't have a lot more health, because they did. The kobolds, all the hard kobolds, the melees and the casters had ridiculous spell resistance at the time. So you couldn't one-shot them, and then every monster in the last room was a red name, so you couldn't just use stun effects or anything.
Mm-hmm. I want to wrap this section of our discussion up, but really quick, I want to answer Trilogy's question. Like, what are we considering endgame? That's a difficult question to answer. There's kind of two primary endgames, quote endgames, in DDO. One is the heavy triar track, like getting to triple completionist. The other one is, I would say, probably consider like whatever the last 3 raids are. 3 being a very loose number, but essentially like the last couple sets of raids is probably where you're going to see the quote end game in terms of what's the harder content. It's kind of an arbitrary thing. It's always kind of a moving target with DDO, but that's kind of where it is. One thing I want to ask about this, because they've been out for a while, were champions successful?
Yes. Champions are my favorite part of the whole game, because champions remind me of Diablo 2, which is amazing, and I kind of wish they went further. Like, if that was the one thing I would say about difficulty, if they made an ultimate difficulty mode, they should just, every monster's a champion, ramp up the effects, none of this resistance, give them immunity to lightning, immunity to acid that randomly spawns in every monster, so you need multiple people to get through quests. And you can't just, like, run through with one character that can do it all. Like, champions are, like, the key to difficulty, I think, for DDO.
I definitely agree. Last night I was running Grim and Barrett on Antha. She's level 20 right now. And we're running it on Epic Elite, and I had two of the champion Abishai come out. Man, I took off running the other direction.
Champions are great because they add that variability to quests, and I love quests that have variability. I think one of the ways you keep quests fresh is when they're variable. All my favorite quests in the game always have variation to them, especially when you go back to like the old Amrath quests and the Veil quests and some of those. You know, that's great, and champions add that element to it. That because we run these quests so much, we know them all so well that we need that element of surprise.
Yeah, I think when we come, we might talk about this a little bit too later, but a lot of the times where these discussions are coming from is I'm starting to get bored with the game, which kind of goes back to how fast are they putting out content compared to how many characters am I running, and how fast can I consume that content. You can consume content a lot faster when you have fewer characters. Which is the way. And since we've been pushing towards or players have felt pushed towards fewer characters, and content is, let's face reality, we get less content these days than we have in the past. There's less resources devoted to the game. So the content's not coming out as fast and as numerous as it has at certain times in the past. So I think you kind of end up with that kind of scenario. Is the reason why you start to get a lot of these questions about game difficulty. I would say, personally, I feel pretty good about where the game difficulty is. I think Legendary, when I look at Epic and Legendary, for me, Legendary Normal or Epic Normal is generally soloable by my characters. Hard, I can throw up an LFM and just take the first warm bodies that pop in and can generally get through it. Elite generally takes a little bit more forethought, and who am I running with? And I think again, you talk about a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, this game's too easy." I would be willing to bet that probably a lot of those people are running with a party, like they've got a static or quote static group or guild of a couple people that you're always running that difficulty with. So
yeah, 6 Rangers.
Also true.
Or they play a long, long time. I mean, you can't play this game for 40, 50, 60 hours a week and expect Turbine to be able to provide you with challenging content that's going to keep pace with that. It's just not possible. If you want to run the same character the whole time, too.
I honestly, I think
to
the fact that so many of us have actually played the game for so damn long is kind of like a testament to kind of the good job that they've done so far of keeping people's attention. Like, just with the fact that, yes, they may be slowing down a bit on the content, but they still have so many different venues for things like the reincarnation system, class changes, and updates. I do wish there was more content coming out, though. That would be pretty damn cool.
Do.
Me too.
I'll do.
Yep.
And the conversation is coming out a little bit nicer towards Turbine than I was maybe expecting. It's not to say that they've done everything right either, right? Like, there's been problems and challenges and
absolutely
had to deal with. But I think when it comes to game difficulty, there's it always, when you're looking at discussions in the forums, it always seems to be a lot simpler than they make it appear. But,
well, okay, so I think a big problem, if you want us to start ragging on Turbine, is misuse of systems. So a great example when I say that is they have the Cannith challenges and stuff, and they're pretty fun. But for a reason I can't understand, for something that has a score system and everything else, why doesn't it have a leaderboard?
It used to.
Yeah, but
on Mighty.
I know, but why doesn't it right now? Why aren't we having contests of who can get the highest score and stuff like that? Make it competitive, so people will have something to look forward to every week with
People
like
love
prizes.
that. I agree.
Yeah, like
There's a lot of systems they've abandoned over the years. My DDO people liked as well. And that's gone now. The
Well,
leaderboards are gone.
I think, in fairness, the thing that Turbine has done the worst with when it comes to DDO is systems come and go, the system lifespan. There's a lot of systems that they're constantly seem to be redoing. Now, at the same time, some of those, we talked about random loot and Cannith Crafting, the enhancement system revamp, like those were good things that changed system-wise. The Saga system challenges two things I think that people really liked and haven't been utilized hardly at all since then. There's a lot of crafting systems that are, sometimes they feel half finished and they're just like a small portion of the game, but there's stuff like that in there that, if you remember the bounty hunter system.
Yeah, those are great. Well, and Favorite Soul was one of the first purchasable classes, and it still doesn't have 3 trees. I know they're addressing that now, but when you talk about incomplete systems, that happens a lot. And then there's also what feels like quick fixes, or I don't know. I hate to say half-assing, but just like LGS. How many of those recipes were new versus Heroic Green Steel? Maybe 2 or 3. And
do you think people would have wanted them to be that different, though?
Well, but the game's not the same. I mean, elemental damage and elemental protections and guard aren't what they were in 2008. Sure. I mean, you could create a guard character and put a Heroic Green Steel guard on every slot, and you could just walk around and get hit as a tank and kill things and play PvP and kill things. I mentioned PvP, and I'm really disappointed in myself. But
although I think that had more to do with player reception than anything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
no, it was definitely a systems problem.
Was it?
Oh yeah, it's just a scaling issue. What are you supposed to do when everyone does like 10,000 damage?
This is a PvE game, and it needs to stay that way. But I just felt like Legendary Green Steel was a great opportunity that got missed because they didn't take the time to really say what's different about the game from 2008 to today, and what effects do we need to design in this? Because they gave us a bunch of effects that no one wants, and they didn't give us the things that we need. We don't have the same armor class and defense system we did. There was no MRR or PRR or any of these things back then. AC mattered, and was really about the only thing that mattered.
AC's never mattered.
There was a time when it did.
No,
there was a time when it did.
There was a time
2011.
when 3% of the population AC mattered for because they could reach the you can only hit me on a 20 range. Yeah. But other than that, AC has never really mattered. Yeah. I'd say it's more effective now than it used to be, but
I should rephrase that. AC was all we had.
Yeah, didn't matter. All right, I want to we'll get back on our track here before we run out of time for all this stuff we're talking about. So Severlin had a statement a little while, 2-3 weeks ago maybe, where he said that we are thinking in years. There might be we're talking about possibly having an expansion at the end of 2017. This came out of the news that Turbine had some layoffs, which it's not the first time they've had layoffs. But the kind of news part about that, I think, was more noteworthy was that Turbine is switching to a studio that's going to focus on mobile gaming. Mm-hmm. And the question with that is, does that make us worried about where DDO is going?
How can it not?
Yeah.
I mean, when you say your business, when you say your business is going to focus on mobile, and you're not a mobile game, that's a problem. Clearly, LOTOR and DDO are legacy systems at this point. And I work in IT, and I understand what a legacy system is. Now that doesn't mean you can have legacy systems around for 5-10 years and never really get rid of them, and that's fine. I think that if the games are making money, if they earn more revenue than they cost to maintain, then I'm not sure what for-profit business that has to answer to shareholders is going to dump a profitable business unit. But at the same time, in terms of investment, it's definitely very concerning.
Absolutely. I think that just anytime you hear about layoffs, it's like you don't know like what kind of people or like how is the company going to be shuffling around, who got laid off, what that's going to actually affect. I mean, I have no doubt that the lack of content we're getting is at least semi-related. I mean, but at the same time, you have like the layoff notice, and then you have other posts on the forums of like, oh, there'll
Our
be an
plans haven't
expansion
changed.
sometime. Yeah, our plans haven't changed, or like what expansion's coming out maybe the end of next year, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, maybe they could do less or more with less, but
I question it, just because it's like, if Sev's saying they're going to come out next year, and I'm not saying he's lying, I don't think he is, but what's to say that their parent company, Warner Brothers, isn't going to pull the plug?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how much influence Warner Brothers really has on the studio, in the sense that, well, there's the obvious benefit since Warner Brothers owns like DC. There's probably a correlation there why Turbine made a Batman game, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's
Yeah.
definitely a correlation there. But in terms of, I don't have any idea if Warner Brothers really tells the studio anything more than here's your budget, here's what we expect to get back from you in revenue.
yeah. I'm not going to pretend I understand how the company works, but I mean, there is also something to be said about when you hear, so there's an expansion coming late next year. They can't just, or they're possibly late next year. If that's even in the plan, then they'd have to continue developing for the game, because why would you release an expansion if you didn't really have reliable marketing, or if you didn't have a player base that you think you could actually market it to? Because if it is going to come out next year, that's like 2 years of work, and you want that return on investment. So, I mean, it could potentially mean good things, right? Like that, like not the layoffs, just the announcement that they have to try to build up the player base somehow if they actually want to get their return on an expansion.
I think you mix the two together and you do kind of get a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, right? Like, layoffs are never good for the companies making the game that we enjoy. At the same time, if you're transitioning from a studio that's to go to more of a mobile focus, are those, like, where are those layoffs coming from? Because it doesn't seem to me like there's a whole lot of place where you could really pull people out of DDO.
Well, here's the other question.
There's a small number of people that are there, so.
Warner Brothers is making a Dungeons and Dragons movie as well, and they happen to own a studio that has a Dungeons and Dragons game. I don't know that they would have looked at shutting down Lotoro while they're making the Hobbit movies either. It seems like there's a natural synergy there to, I mean, maybe not necessarily invest in it, but not necessarily to can it either, because you're sure to get some sort of cross interest. People go watch the movie, and then they can find the game and play the game. It certainly seems to me to make some sense. I don't know.
Dude, the Warcraft movie, right? Like, you know how many people went and played Warcraft because of the movie, and then also Hearthstone at the same time? Right?
I don't know that I've seen any reports, but common sense would say there was some value there.
Did people go and see the movie?
Well, they had stuff, yeah.
In China they did.
Well, like in Europe, it was really big, and in a lot of theaters, if you like pre-ordered a ticket, they gave you a free month of game time.
That's kind
so there was like a direct correlation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think my sense is, where is Turbine and DDO going? I would say that DDO is slowly going towards where Asheras Antha is. I have a hard time believing that they would just like completely kill the game, like turn everything off, especially given where Asheras Antha is. So at a certain, we're going to I think we'll continue seeing a slowdown and a ramp down of releases and content coming out, and that kind of a thing. So the game is going to slowly get less and less support.
But that itself will kill the game.
Yes, absolutely. Well, at a certain point in time, yes, the game's going to stop. It's going to be, quote, maintenance mode, right? Or they'll just kind of keep the servers on and keep collecting revenue from the store that people will buy, right?
Yep.
And, with that, eventually, you'd probably have to talk about a server merges and a whole bunch of other crazy things that can create problems. But, down the road, I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. Well, that brings me
Eventually.
back to stuff
Hopefully
like from
that's
the
like
producer's
5 or
letter.
6 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
I just, when they talk about stuff like, oh, they're going to work out if they're making tieflings, how do they get the horns and the tail? Well, if they have to create a new art system, then they could probably figure out how to get it to work with the current stuff, and that opens a whole new venue for cosmetic stuff that they can dump in the store and make more money off of.
True, but it also says, on the flip side of that, says, okay, well, why are we devoting that many resources to horns and tails? Do they really matter that much? Let's just give us tieflings that, if your helmet's not on, then you can see the horns. If the helmet's on, you can't. And let's move on and let's make more content.
I don't know. Vanity is really important for a lot of players.
Sure. I'm just offering the other side of the coin.
Yeah, well, if it was a choice between content and seeing horns through helmets, I would choose content every day and twice on Sunday. But I think they've been pretty clear that the people who do horns don't do content. So it's not an either-or situation. But I do get frustrated when I see them.
It might become that soon, though, as more people... Just so, something that I did want to put out there, this is kind of slash news, but it fits really well here when we're talking about this. Severlin is now the executive producer of both DDO and Lotro.
Mm-hmm.
And I think still Asheron's Call. Possibly, because I think he still has, at least last I heard, he still has responsibilities for Asheron's Call to make sure things are going there. Jerry is now, Cordovan is now the community manager for both Dungeons & Dragons Online and Lord of the Rings Online. Although it seemed like that might be more of a short-term thing than a longer-term thing. And then he also has responsibilities for Asheron's Call. So they're definitely starting to... We're losing resources, for sure, if that's the case, right? And there may become a time where the art asset people are the content. Like, it's, okay, well, there's now a team of 10 people working on this game, period.
Yikes,
Are they doing art, or, when that we could be going in that direction sooner than later. Well, we've had a 10-year run. That's a good run for a game.
Absolutely.
We've outlasted at least one other Turbine game.
I feel like DDO is the kind of game that probably won't disappear. Like, just because there's no other game like DDO, it kind of has that going for it. Like, I know too many people that have played other MMOs, stuff like that, and then they're just like, 'cause if you play Lord of the Rings, well, you can't play World of Warcraft. It's the same game, and you can't play Star Wars because they're the same game. So if you want to try something new, you're kind of out of options, unless like DDO is one of those few options you can actually turn to. I more think of like seeing that Severlin taking over responsibilities on the other game as more of, because I still play Lord of the Rings Online. That game is dying way worse than DDO is dying, if you want to call DDO dying when we're getting new content and stuff.
I feel the same way. I think that Lord of the Rings Online is suffering way more right now. And if you go back to the Warner Brothers thing, Warner Brothers isn't making any more movies for that because they don't have the rights from the Tolkien estate. So they're kind of stuck in terms of what they can do with that in a
They'll reboot it in 5 years.
Oh, they could do that.
And how well do you think the D&D movie is going to do?
About as well as the other ones?
Yeah.
Hopefully better, because those were not good. The first one wasn't terrible. Well, the first one was terrible. What am I saying?
Yeah, I have high hopes. Exactly so. Yeah, I don't know. I think, if I'm honest with myself, where is DDO going? I think it's fading into the sunset.
Yep.
I think it's
there's no doubt. How many 10-year-old games aren't fading into the sunset?
true.
Maybe World of Warcraft, and that's about it.
Well, I think in 5 years we'll be asking how many games did Pokemon Go kill?
I was going to say, what games are replacing all these games?
Mobile games. That's why Turbine's going mobile.
Yeah, Clash of Clans, War. What is it?
Everyone's going to spend, every gaming studio that has any kind of R&D money right now is going to spend the next 5 years trying to make the next Pokemon Go game.
Well, potentially. Like, the way I think about it is that when people started leaving World of Warcraft, like, where did they go? Did they just, like, quit gaming forever and be like, I don't play MMOs anymore because there's no World of Warcraft? Like, they picked up other venues and stuff. That's why, like, Elder Scrolls right now is doing so unbelievably well, because they picked up all of the WoW people. They're, like, the second most popular MMO right now? They've got, like, 2 million players or something? or subscribed players, which is ridiculous. I don't know. I don't see the game as dying just because DDO has this really unique niche.
It's got a great community too. I
Mhm.
mean, I think
Unless you go to the
we're
forums.
able to have this discussion and this stuff on the forums, and we're talking about the end game difficulty. Really where that's coming from is the player base loves the game and cares about the game, right? That's where a lot of that comes from.
Mhm.
Even when it's Turbine, what have you done? It's really from a Turbine, what have you done? I loved this game. Why did you change this? Right? So.
Yep.
Or Turbine, what are you doing? This game used to be awesome. I want it to be awesome for another 10 years.
Make
So.
DDO great again.
Let's not go there. Anything else you guys want to say before we hit into game news?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
All right. Then we're going to get into game news here, which is pretty small. The biggest thing, actually, the only thing worthy of note this week, weekly Wednesday server restarts. So they're going to the point where on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, they're going to do weekly restarts of the servers. This will be done to promote general health of the game environment. Please note that when worlds reopen, it will take up to an hour for guild airship amenities to repopulate.
They're really just bringing that back, aren't they? Because the
I
worlds
don't-
used to reset often, and now and then it stopped for a while, and then we started having issues, and now they're resetting it constantly.
I don't think there was ever really a concerted. I might be wrong, but I don't think there was a concerted effort to restart the worlds on a specific time frame. I think more what it was they were doing more maintenance on the system. They were putting more. They're investing more money into the system, and we were getting content updates more regularly, so the world was naturally restarting more. Gravisters on the forums asked, please use that time window for patches and updates also, and Jerry chimed in and said, as a matter of fact, that is a possibility in the future. If there are a handful of things that we would want to fix or update, this provides us with a weekly window. Granted, it's still a new build and all, but it may be well they can sneak in some work between patches, which would not be the worst thing in the world.
That's just my initial thought. Is like, yeah, they can, but they still have to make an entirely new build to do it. So depending on how much extra work it is to try to get that in for every week, because it's a little bit more complicated than being like, oh, cool, slap in the new code and then reset it.
Agumord's actually saying that in the chat that a lot of MMOs do weekly regular restarts to promote health of the game. So,
well, World of Warcraft does.
Well, I think World of Warcraft is a lot more people banging on it with sticks. Let's see. Bonus days. Through this weekend, July 31st, you can get 10% bonus XP for every member in your party, not including raid groups, other than yourself. Also, it's Champion Hunter Week, so you can find cloaks and crowns in the Remnants vendor through August 4th. Sales for the store this week. You can get 35% off of Harper Agents, like Stat Tomes, Veteran Status, and Classes. You can also get a lesser Treasure Hunter Elixir for free using the code TreasureHunt1.
Yeah, this is one of the best times to pay to win. So if you have money, crack it open. Get them cheap tomes, buy Warlock. Get some Treasure Hunters Elixirs.
Warlock's not on sale, is it?
I thought it was Classes too.
Veteran Status. Oh, 30% off Classes. Yep, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So buy your tomes, buy your Warlock, and get your treasure potions, and you're good to go.
I don't know if this is entirely true, but I thought it was pretty funny, so I'm going to read it anyways. This comes from Random Snorlax. The reason people leave is because they're dramatic and there's a lot of role players in the DDO community. It's one of the main reasons DDO is dying out. I don't know. I think it's more that I don't know if it's role players so much as if you're talking about role players in the sense of people that role play in the game, I think it's off the mark. If you're talking about people who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and role playing pen and paper, I think that might be close to the mark, in that it's your game, right? People really like doing the game, really like D&D. He may be saying troll players too. I'm not entirely sure. But I think people care about D&D and DDO, so when they don't like what they see, sometimes they're going to leave. But let's see, community news. Let's talk about some of that, shall we? The DDO Chronicle, 199th episode of the Chronicle. Hey, we're almost at 200. That's exciting. Let's see. Shinkaijo Explores DDO is a new Saturday night stream on DDO Stream. The Guild for the Week, Arcane Alliance on Orion, is holding a Guild recruitment event. The Guild will be giving away prizes to guildies and more. The comment for the week, you roll a 1. What happens? Nothing good. That's my answer.
Critical failure. We need more of that.
The trap box explodes.
See, that's what I imagine. It's like the perfect usage of that meme. Instructions unclear. Dick cotton ceiling fan. You roll the 1.
Yeah, that's a good example of that. Sure. You just go look on YouTube and look for safety work fails. And that's when you roll a 1. I've been watching a few of those of late, especially in my industry where people do really stupid things, and they think that they're going to work, and they don't, for every reason you would imagine. Fansite news. DDOCast discusses spell selection for Druids and Rangers. That was finishing our spell selection series last week. DDO Players News looked at crafting, mail, expansions, and more with their 94th episode. DDO Gamer talked philosophy and loot in a new blog post. Even Note took a guildie through their first Shroud run. Mickey had an update on her first TR build, and Tactilicious and Craftilicious is excited for crafting. Let's see, other fun stuff going on. Let's see if there's anything else in here. It covers the Chronicle. Let's see. Other things. This was a really old blog, but I thought it was kind of fun to read. It's from BioBreak, 10 things I'd love to see added to DDO. This is from September 2009. So it's older. But it was fun to kind of look and see, like, got that, didn't get that, got that, sort of got that. So I'll link that in show notes. Massively Overpowered has a podcast, and on their 75th episode this last week, they had a little bit of time where they talked about DDO and Lotro and Turbine in general. They also used DDO music for their intro music, which was kind of fun for the whole thing. So we'll link to that in our show notes as well. Lastly, Gen Con is coming up. It is next weekend. There is a gathering for buffs. It will be at the Omni Severin Bar, approximately starting at 8 to 9 and running until close. They say to come and go as you see fit to fit your gaming schedules. So if you're going to be in the area for Gen Con, stop by, say hi to folks, get some buffs, and enjoy yourself. Let's see, Lightning Post. We'll move into that. So this is talking about our Ranger and Druids spell selection from last week. Fuji Video said about the summons, he found that the Pale Master Skeleton, based on no point investment, just the first 2 action points are pretty good. They do enough DPS and has enough survivability to make you get through the epic hard quest on solo on First Life off Destiny without even having to hit all the shrines. Just haste and blur and displace yourself. So that's an option. He does say that summons are useless because you can't actually control them. Otherwise, they would be really useful, which would be nice. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon, though.
I'm still baffled by how, like, Hireling AI, like, it can't find enemy monsters and you get stuck on walls and stuff. But the monsters, they never do that. They get you no matter where you are.
I don't know. I think the monsters find me even when I'm not there. That's generally my experience with certain arrows and collision checks.
I like how you can maintain aggro even if you're dead these days.
Yeah, right? I find that to be particularly troubling when I'm on, say, a caster with very low PRR, and it's a devil that teleports around. And he runs away, I'm like, oh, good, I'm in the clear. Res, teleport, swipe, dead. Oh, that sucks. Fuzzy Duck wrote in, Druids are an odd kind of class, since unlike others which are at their best when focusing on a specific type of build, In his opinion, the real strength of a druid is their ability to switch between roles on the fly. They essentially specialize in being a generalist, which is true in pen and paper for a large part, too. The druid SLAs are all great, and a large part of why he likes taking a large spell feat, since you can destroy enemies from a long distance at very little spell point cost. He said the weapon generated by the Flame Blade spell increases in power with levels, but the new loot system massively overshadows it. He agrees heavily with Sleet Storm. It's a phenomenal spell, not just slowing enemies, but blinding them. Fire Shield is great. Remember, druids can wear non-metallic, medium, or even heavy armor, too, with the feat. He specifically mentions Dragon Scale Plate, and non-metallic large or even tower shields, like the Madstone or Stone Wall. The shield out of Fire on Thunder Peaks is a great druid shield. Every druid should go and get that one, even though you're probably going to have to run the raid 20 times.
The new shield out of Multitude of Menace as well is wood.
You just say orbs are nice too in the offhand, but watch out for the Thunder Horde ones. They are metallic. They will break your oath, which is always unfortunate. Another useful thing to remember about Druid's healing is that regenerate spells will stack with vigor spells. Very true. We did not mention that at all, unfortunately, and we should have. But there you go. Small shout out for Lesser Mass Vigor, not for Druids, but rather for Rangers, to the Deepwood Stalker Tree, where it's powered by animal empathy charges. It can provide some great support healing for your entire party with no spell point cost. If you invest in it. Lesser Vigor is not exactly the best healing spell in the game, but yeah, it's certainly going to help. Also, in his opinion, Ranger spell list is brilliant because it ties in perfectly with the whole theme of the class as a self-sufficient, lightweight, sneaky scout, skirmisher, and archer type. Which I guess is true, but I'm still going to say that it's probably the worst spell list in the game. I don't know of anyone that's any better.
Paladin would be if it wasn't for Zeal and Holy Sword.
It's true. And Death Ward. They get Death Ward, too.
That's true.
Which I guess kind of cancels out with... we'll say that cancels out with freedom of movement, but yeah, otherwise it's pretty dicey. Our survey question for the week comes from Dominari. Where can I find tomes, is the question. Where do you guys like to go to find tomes?
The DDO store.
The DDO store. It's the best time.
DDO store. Let's support the game.
Yeah.
Auction house, shard exchange.
If you actually want one, 5,000 favor.
Or 1750 gets you a +2 tome as well.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
It's a lot less favor than 5,000, all right?
If you're a mad power gamer, as it turns out, you can go run Temple of Elemental Evil on Epic Elite for 10 billion hours, and you can pull some +7 tomes out of there.
If you're lucky.
I don't know, Loot Weekend with the Chest Blesser.
Oh, yeah.
If you're really lucky. Yeah, I don't know. My general experience is tomes are not... They're not as necessary as a lot of people would have you think. I generally don't really go looking too much for tomes. Other things we didn't mention that weren't mentioned here, 20th completion lists on a lot of the raids oftentimes have tomes available. Heroic Shroud is a great example. You get a complete list of tomes. They're, I think, +2 to 3 for every stat. So there's options there as well.
Tower of Despair is good for the +4s, I think.
Yeah, my Barbarian got 2 +4 Charisma tomes out of there for 20th and reward lists.
Yay.
Yeah, yay. I think with that, we'll close out the show. Let's see. Ash, do you have anything you want to plug here before we head out?
Watch Me Die on Tuesday at 8 Eastern.
And you're probably going to show up this time.
I will probably show up this time, on time.
We've had Ash was supposed to join us the last couple of weeks and had some real life issues, and then we crossed some time zone issues. But we think we got it all fixed now, so hopefully he'll come play with us. Antha, do you want to give a shout out to anything? Uh-oh. Might have lost him here. Strimtom, why don't you, what do you got going on?
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to shout out. So one, I do like the cool live stream and stuff on the DDO stream every Monday from 7 to 10, which is pretty sweet. And then I also have my own live stream channel, which I'm just going to link in the chat there so you can follow me, because you should. It's just good for you. It's fun. But actually, even better than that, I have an event coming up in 2 days. I'm going to be running Temple of Elemental Evil heroic difficulty on level with a group of friends, all first lifers, no warlocks, and we're all warforged as well. And we're gonna be doing parts 1 and 2, the whole thing. While we're doing it, because I know a lot of people haven't seen the heroic difficulty one, because it is one of the hardest heroic quests you can do. But I'm also going to be doing giveaways and stuff. So I'll have Turbine Point codes, expansions, and all sorts of wacky stuff. So if you happen to be around on Monday, 2 days from now, from 7 to 10 Eastern Daylight Time, I recommend you check it out.
We tried to do that on
Have some
DDOCast,
UMD.
and it didn't work out so well. We did great till the end fight of part 1, and then we got creamed. Mostly because we couldn't get the stupid Earth Elemental stick to work.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I think two of us were trying to make that work, and then by the time we realized that, hey, this is not working, half of us were dead already, and it went downhill from there pretty quick.
Did it bug?
I don't know. We just couldn't get the elemental charm,
Huh.
which was unfortunate because that was kind of our strategy. And as soon as that went, the whole thing fell apart, and it was a wipe. But it was good fun. Let's see. So thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for the folks in the chat room and being part of a fairly lively discussion this week. Thanks for these guys here for joining me. And thanks to all the other contributors for DDOCast. It's a great group of folks that help make that happen. And also thanks to Turbine for making DDO. We do appreciate the work that they do on DDOCast. We hope that they continue to be able to do a lot for the game going forward, even if it may not be as much as we want. But we do appreciate the work that is going on there. So thanks to them, and thanks to Wizards for making D&D and letting them do DDO. And thanks to Cybers for hosting the podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you want to be part of the show, or if you have a comment on this episode, you have a question you'd like to hear us answer, something you'd like to hear us debate on one of our debate shows, if you just want to say hi, leave a comment, or you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for latest cast updates. Our closing tip for the week comes from Fern on Kyber, and she says, get a Silver Flame amulet from the Necropolis. This is a good one. It's far better than the Emerald Claw one. It gives you Death Ward and negative energy absorption. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather for buffs.